We good? Okay. So, explaining programming in 45 minutes. This is going to be fun. So, the first thing I want to talk about is variables and assignment. So, yeah, if you want to. So, Steven's going to type as I talk. This is the way this is going to work. With an R and an E and then an M and a Y. That's it, the normal way. It's a good start. It's a good start. So just to explain what's going on the screen here, I'll point at both windows at once. But the top bit is where Steven's typing, and then when he runs what he's typed, you'll see down here. There we go. Can you just put puts on P for a second? Just as a, so you'll see, so puts, okay? First thing we're going to learn today, puts output something to the console below. So this is where the top half, the black part, is where the input is, and the bottom half is where the output is. So you'll only see stuff down here that is puts something. And when he runs it, there might be multiple puts in the program, and you'll see multiple things down here. But we're trying to keep it simple enough. So assignment, strings. So Jeremy Walker, in quotation marks. This is what we call a string. It is. It can be as long, pretty much, or as short as you want. It can contain one character or lots of characters. And it can be in single quotation marks or double quotation marks. Some languages specify one, some languages specify another. It does make a difference in Ruby, but for all intents and purposes for now, think of if you see a single quotations or a double, it's a string. And that's just words. It's the same thing as you come across every day. And what we're doing is we've got on the left this name equals. And what we're saying is that a variable called name is being assigned this value. And we can change it. So just to totally break away from the script, I'm going to do this a lot. So if on line 2 you put name equals Steven, what you're going to see so we've now changed the value of name to Steven. So it started off as Jeremy Walker. On the next line, we changed to Steven. On the bottom line, it's ended up as Steven. So we can change variables and things as everyone. That's why I call it a variable. We have variable values as time goes on. Now, is everyone with me so far? That's good. So variables are objects. They are a thing that exists. We've got a really simple object there, a string. We could also have another object like a number. I'm breaking away from the script again. So we could say age equals 29. And then we could print out age, and you'll see that it's going to show 29. And we can have much more complicated objects that we're going to get to in a minute. These are very, very basic objects. So you see we've got name is still Steven, and age is still 29. And on variables, on objects, we can call various methods or send messages to these things. So if we get back on script, sorry. So we can have, rather than just putting name, we could put name.reverse. And what that'll do is it'll put my name reversed. And all we're doing there is sending a message to string. And string has this, knows that if it hears a message called reverse, it should reverse whatever its value is and output it out. We could do something else, like uppercase, for instance, which will put it in uppercase. Or we could do something like gsub, which substitutes a value. In this case, we're going to substitute walk, and we're going to substitute it for talk, as I'm talking. And that will output Jeremy Talker. So all of these messages are predefined on the string class. So the class string is something that is part of Ruby, it's part of its core, and it has various what are called methods that are defined on it that we can send messages to. So if you changed that to be age equals 29 rather than name equals Jeremy Walker, sorry, and then did age.gsub, and try and gsub anything, it won't work. 2 for 1, say, haven't they? That's not going to work. It's going to say undefined method gsub. You can see that at the bottom there. Because fixnum, a fixed number, which is what 29 is, hasn't got this idea of gsub defined on it. So somebody at some point has come along and defined the concept of gsub on string, which means we can now call it. And in a minute, we're going to define some of our own methods, and you'll get a feel for this. So you can also do arithmetic and things. life expectancy bit, yeah. So we can set a couple of variables. So we've got my age, which is 29, and we've got my life expectancy, and I'm pretty precise that I'm going to live to 100.5 years old. And therefore we know that so far how much of my life has expired. This is going to be a complicated number, but because it's a computer, it can tell us very easily. So we can see how much of my life has expired. So I am 28.8% of the way through my life if I live for 100.5 years, which is quite depressing. And we can do various things to that. So up here, Steven's just put .2i on the end of that number. And so what that's going to do is going to change it from a floating point number, as we call it, a number that's got a decimal point in, to a number that's an integer. He's also changing the string that's outputted. So we're now creating a string and sort of embedding this number in the middle of the string. So we're creating this new string. You are life expired amount of the way through. Don't, it's good advice. You've got wrong quotation marks. They're not matching. They do. So you can now see I'm 28%. And you'll see that before, if you just take that 2i off a second, and we can just see the difference. So before we had this long string, but because we're changing life expired to an integer, it just becomes a single number with no. So again, we're just calling methods, and all this is doing, we're calling methods, passing messages around. Is everyone with me? This is pretty simple. Good. Yes?
Oh, it's Alt+3 or pound sign.
What console?
It's called Code Runner. It's on the Mac App Store.
Nice. Good. Right. So we've seen there two of the basic built-in types, strings and integers. Now, what Ed was talking about earlier in programming being modeling, and that's what we're going to look at now. So we have modeled the concept of a string, well, Ruby have modeled the concept of a string and modeled the concept of a number. And we're now going to model the concept of a doctor. And to do this, we're going to use this keyword class. And class defines a model, basically. That's what it's doing. It's defining a class. And on it, we can create our own methods that you're going to use. So we're going to create, we're going to say a doctor can have a name. And we're going to create a method that means we can set that name. And we're going to have another method which will get that name back, which we'll then be able to call on this doctor. I'm just going to let Steven type from it. To explain some of the syntax that's going on. So at the top here, we've got class. Class is defining the model. We've then got def. Def is defining. Def stands for define. And it's defining a function that we can call later on. So gsub has literally been written as class string def gsub, and then some implementation in there. Or on integer, it's going to be class fixnum def 2i. We're then saying name equals. So we're creating a method quite literally called name equals, which means if you just run the bit at the bottom, if we call name.equals on a doctor object, which we'll come to in a second, it will know that you're talking about this method here. So right here, where we write name equals, and it ignores the space, it is calling this method and running this functionality. You've got a typo in the top method, by the way. It should be name equals str. Down the line. Yeah, there. So what we're doing is, on line 12, we're saying name equals and then passing a string in. And that's calling this method up here in name2, on line 2. And it's passing this variable of Stevan Wing in, and it's saving it as part of this doctor object using the @ sign. And @ name means that we are saying that a doctor has a name. We are defining that a property of a doctor is a name. And so we are saying when we call the name equals method, we are setting it. If you just rename name equals to actually rename the method to set name rather than name equals and get rid of the equal sign. No, just set underscore name and get rid of the equals. Get rid of the equal sign on line 2. If we come down and then on line 12, change that to be set name and get rid of the equals, and then change it to be get name on the line below. So you can see we've got the same functionality. So we've defined these two methods, set name and get name. One that takes a parameter and saves it, and the other one that returns the parameter back out. Does that make sense? Who said not really? Does it not? Which bit are you stuck on?
I think maybe use the word class and object interchangeably.
Okay, let me explain class and object a bit better. So we have this class as a doctor. Does this sort of, as a self-contained unit, make sense, forgetting the bit at the bottom? So we have the concept of a doctor, and we have a message called setName and a message called getName. And we have functionality within those two things. Then what we're saying down at the bottom here is doc equals doctor.new. So we're saying we are creating a doctor, saving it in this variable called doc. So exactly as we did earlier, where we said, whatever we had on the first bit, we had name equals Jeremy Walker, we are saying doc equals doctor.new. So, can I just type 2 ticks? Sorry. So you could also say, when we had earlier name equals Jeremy Walker, that's exactly the same as saying name equals string.new Jeremy Walker. Those two lines are interchangeable. So this is just a shortcut here. So on line 14, we're saying doc equals doctor.new. We're saying give us one of these doctors and let us access this functionality on it and save it into this variable. Exactly the same way on line 11, we're saving this into a variable. And then on line 15, we're just calling this method. On line 16, we're just calling another method on it.
Classes and objects are quite a difficult entity. I remember it taking me quite a while to get my head around it. Does everyone kind of know what we mean by classes and objects? So you can have a class of things that have similar properties. So you can define a class, for example, doctors, but then there's different types of doctors. So within that class, you can have different instances. So they have the similar properties, but they're slightly different, and you may have different methods. So all it allows us to do is to organise code in a different way. That's kind of the idea of classes, isn't it?
It's modelling an idea. So if you just get rid of the name and then just make AMC equals doc.new underneath that. So we're going to create another doctor. So we've got this one template, if you like. A class is a template of what a doctor is. We're explaining the concept of a doctor. And we can make lots of doctors now. So we've made a Stevan Wing. We can now make an Anne-Marie Cunningham. And we could make an Ed Wallet. And we could make all of these doctors and have lots of them, each with their own properties and values around them.
It should be set name.
It should be.
Set name is the variable given
So,
these classes, so then you can then build upon it, so you can give them an age.
yes, exactly. That's the next thing we're going to do. So the variable within the doctor is actually at name. And what we're doing is we've got a set name and a get name, which are just allowing us to access that variable. And in a second, I'll show you a shortcut for that. You're going to need to rename set name at the top to name equals again, if that makes sense.
For example, if you think of classes, like if you say that's heart, okay, so we've all hopefully got a heart, and those are the individual instances of a heart. And the heart does various things. So it relax, that would be one method. It can contract, that would be another method.
Line 12, name equals.
We're giving it the same heart in general, whether it's yours or mine or wherever. They're able to perform this function.
Does that make any more sense now you've got two doctors on there? So, put your hand up if you get it. Put your hand up if you sort of get it. Put your hand up if you're totally lost. Okay, thank you for being honest. Okay. The totally lost people are going to have to talk to me in a break. And the rest of you, hopefully, you'll get it with a bit more time. So I'm going to show you, we'll show you a shortcut now, which maybe makes it a little bit easier to get around. You can leave, well, I'd leave it there. Most of it's the same. I'm just going to change one bit. Okay. So we just want to change those two lines to be *accessor. So we're taking the name equals and the name gets bits that we just had, and we're just going to use the shortcut name. And we're also going to add a role on there. Let's do type. So we're literally replacing the name equals and the get name and the instant variable set with a shortcut, because that's something you use so often when you're modeling something, that Ruby's given us a shortcut to get around this. And so we now can use this exact same code again. We can also specify a role, as the gentleman over there suggested a moment ago, the age or whatever. Superstar neurologist. And if we run that, there you go. So we've now defined these two properties on a doctor. Slightly simpler syntax, but I wanted you to understand what was going on in the background. Does that make more sense to the people who are lost, or are they still equally lost? Still equally lost. Good. Yes?
Sorry, you might want to think of a class as something that doesn't actually do anything. It's like a blueprint of when you go to build a house, you start with a blueprint, a drawing, to build that house. So you create an instance of that class to build the house. And then you can take that blueprint again, pick up the class and build another house. Keep doing that. And so the blueprint is actually the class, and the house is the object. I think.
Yeah. That's exactly right, yeah.
So the object is doc.
The object is doc, and the class is doctor.
I think sorry, I didn't
No.
that using the term doc is confusing because people associate
Yeah,
with doc.
maybe if you just change that to Stephen.
Something like
Yes, no, that makes good sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was confusing.
Yeah.
Doc and doctor.
So yeah, having multiple, remember you can have as many as doctors as you want with whatever properties. So we could shove another AMC underneath that, as we love to do, where we set a name and we set a role as GP. Yeah. We're focusing purely on GPs now today. Maybe it'll help if we define another method on doctor when Stephen's done this. Do you want to just define the pretty name method on doctor? The pretty name method. So we've got this doctor, and we know that a doctor has a name and a doctor has a role. And what we can now do is start to build functionality on this. So we can add a method, just in the same way we just did. We can add a method, and we're going to call it pretty name, which is just a slightly nicer way of displaying the name. We're going to use the same stuff we used at the beginning, so we're just using a string, and we're putting in here the name, and we're going to put in brackets the role. And then we're going to output that, and it's going to show that in a slightly nicer format for us. So the get and the set have been replaced by the attribute accessor. Yeah. So we've just created this new name, pretty name, which we're now going to output to the console. And you need to puts in the. You need to puts at the beginning. Yeah. So we can now see that we've now got this pretty name method that we're calling. So we're sending this message to Steven saying, give us the pretty name. And it is concatenating these two strings, so name and role, and putting them into a nicer format. And we could add whatever functionality we want onto this concept of a doctor. You're losing the top of the thing on the screen. Just so you know. So we can have 1,000 different methods on this doctor class if we want to, that output different things and set different things. And concatenate, they could do maths, they could do all sorts of things. And we're just going to continue building this model of a doctor. So a slightly more tongue-in-cheek method, but another example, is the spam AMC method. So AMC spends her life spamming us on Twitter. And so... So we're going to add a method. So we believe every doctor has the fundamental right to spam AMC. And so we're going to add this message. It doesn't make so much sense that we have a doctor who is AMC who's now spamming AMC. But we can now call Steven.spamAMC, which means Steven will send a message to AMC. Your tweets are beautiful. Because that's got to be really annoying being told that over and over and over and over and over again. Your tweet's nice. So there you go. So at the bottom, we now have called that method, and it has printed out your tweets are beautiful. So it's literally, if you, yeah. Do you want to just get rid of the AMC bit above that? Yeah. Just to give us a bit more room. Just get rid of those 3 lines, just so we can squeeze it a bit. Yeah.
Sorry,
Cool.
Does it remember who AMC is?
If we get rid of those 3 lines.
You just don't.
No. It's running this from scratch every time.
Keep that script, so it just gets.
Yeah, exactly. And so what you would actually do in reality is you'd break the script into multiple files. So you tend to have every class lives in its own file, and sometimes in Ruby you actually break a class up into multiple files as well. And then this code that's running it would sort of be an application file that you're actually running application code in. So yeah, so the way you're writing software is to build up models of objects, real-world objects, generally slightly on a lower level, more practical. But what we're going to look at later when we look at websites is building a doctor object, and then building a patient object, and then building a prescription object, and then building some medicine that you've prescribed. And suddenly all of these objects are getting modeled, and then you can view them on a web page, and you can create associations between the models. So you know that a doctor prescribes medicine to a patient, and you build these models up, and so you can build prescribing functions in and such things like that. So we could quite literally just keep adding methods onto this to model what a doctor is.
Should we just go on to array?
We can, yeah. How are we doing? Nods, shakes? Slightly more nods than last time I asked. Right. So we're going to keep this doctor, yeah, fine. So we're going to get rid of the spam AMC method, and we'll go out to a slightly more basic doctor method. And we're going to talk about arrays. So these, does everyone know what array is? Is that a word that's familiar to you? No. So arrays are collections. So it might be better just to initialize first, actually.
Okay.
Just to save you typing a lot.
That's fine.
Okay.
Everything's built in.
Okay. So we're going to quickly create 2 doctors. Pardon?
We're going to write any prescribing solution.
Yeah.
This afternoon.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I think this is challenging if you've done that coding.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's good.
You keeping it up?
Keep it up.
Good.
I ought to be able to. But I don't write code, and I've just written some Ruby for the first time. And
Amazing.
it broke due to my bad copying without pasting.
Perfect. So we're going to talk about arrays. So arrays are collections. So we're going to make a couple of doctors, and we're going to put them in a collection. And what that means is we can then sort through the collection. We can go through the collection running various methods on different things. So a real-world example of this might be if you're a GP surgery and you have 100 patients, if only, you have 100 patients and they're in a collection, and you might want to list those patients on a web page. And so you have this collection of patients, and then you just start listing through them, printing each one out onto a web page. So the syntax, well, can we just use an array.new to start rather than square brackets? So we're going to say doctors equals array.new. Yeah, doctors equals small d. With a capital A. Capital A and round brackets, as in a capital A and array. So. And then we can put in there Steven and Ed, as in the objects you've just made, rather than the strings. So we've got this array now, this collection, that contains in it both Steven and Ed. And we can iterate through this array. So that's fine. Right, use square brackets. You can't use that apparently. So we'll use a shorter syntax for it to get rid of the array.new. Get rid of the array.new. Get rid of that bit. Yeah. Cool. So we now have an array of doctors. So we're going to iterate through this array of doctors. So we're going to say for each doctor we've got in this array, we want to print out this pretty name. So the syntax for this, we're saying we've got this array of doctors. Now we're sending the each message to it. This has been defined just like we've defined pretty name, just like we've defined other things. But the array class that's built in has this method called each. And it allows you to, it says for each of these doctors, we're going to take a doctor, and then we're going to, you need to put doctor dot pretty name. We're going to put the pretty name of the doctor. Yeah. So this has just gone through and printed out these two objects at the bottom, again using the method we've called. So make two doctors, put two doctors in a collection, cycle through the doctors, and run the method on each one.
What's the doctors.each do? What's that?
So doctors.each do. So this syntax is called a block. I wouldn't get too hung up on it as a syntax. In fact, can you just change it to for doctor in doctors? Yeah. For doctor in doctors.
Do that one. Do the.
They're not going to explain. They don't understand blocks.
What do you want to do?
Can you run it? So we're saying for each doctor in this array, in this collection of doctors, we're going to loop through and call this method. The other syntax is a nice syntax to work with when you're a bit more experienced, but this is probably a bit simpler. And so we can have 100 doctors in here, and we could just loop through them all. So if you go back to what I was saying a minute about on a web page, listing the doctors that work at your doctor's surgery, your application knows that you have 10 doctors. It lists them, it goes through each one, and then instead of putting a pretty name, it might have some HTML in there that we'll come to later that shows a photo and shows a description, has their email address and things. Does that make sense? Yes.
So this is also about the case, the other case, the upper case.
Yep.
So for doctor, okay.
Yeah, so the only uppercase things we have are classes. So this isn't a rule in all languages, but in Ruby, if something is a class, then it has to start with an uppercase letter. If something is not a class, it has to start with a lowercase letter, and that's actually a rule within the language. But it's also a general rule is that variables, things that can change throughout your program, tend to have lowercase letters, and things that are constant tend to have uppercase letters. That tends to be the general rule of thumb. Yeah. Ah, there you go. Yes. Does this for syntax at the bottom make sense? So these are actually the basic core constructs of programming. Loops, variables, classes, objects, these sorts of things are the things that when software developers are thinking about how to make a project, they're the sort of things that they're modeling in their head as to how a solution is going to be made. Say again, sorry?
Selection like if tests or
Yeah? That's a good idea. So let's look at some if statements. So on Doctor, we're going to add another accessor called age. Sorry, that's going to work with me. Okay, and for in fact, let's get rid of name and role for a second. Or let's get rid of role. Just have name. So we've got name and age, and if you get rid of pretty name as well, just to keep it really simple. Okay, so we're going to make a few doctors. So we've got Stephen first of all, and he's going to have a name, and then he's going to have an age of whatever your age is. Integer. And then how old are you, Ed? 20. Someone shout out their name and age. Oh, come on, you can't all be ashamed.
Rob Dyke, 33.
Thank you. Can you make me a Rob Dyke? So again, it's just this simple, just to keep creating more doctors, more people. No, so speech marks just stand for strings. So that's just shortcut for a string, whereas an age is a fixed number. So if you add Rob into the doctors,
Presumably you could put it as a string if you don't want to use it as a number.
yeah, you definitely could do. And then if you just change that to x.name.
Sure, the X
Hello.
bit doesn't matter what it is.
It doesn't matter what it is, no, that's what, and nor does the doctors. So doctors could be smelly people. It could be literally,
The same array name, of course.
that and that, the line 18 and 20 have to be the same.
Yeah.
but the word doctor itself is not a special word. And yeah, the only sort of special words that you're defining are ones that start with capital letters.
If you have hundreds of doctors,
Yeah.
is there a way of putting first and last?
Yep. Yeah, we can do that. So if you want to, so you can see, I'll answer that now. Those 3 dots have just been printed out. If just below that, if you just on the line below the loop, you just put smelly people dot first dot name. So I hope. So again, you can see at the bottom of there, if you can just comment out the, yeah, thanks. So you can now see it's getting the first person's name out of there. If you change first to last, it will get the last person's name out. No, first to last. Beautiful. So it's now getting Bob's name out. And you can actually access the array through index as well. So we can use square bracket notation to say we want smelly people square brackets 2. You need to get rid of the dot before it. Yeah, and that's going to get the index number 2. Now arrays index from 0. So Stephen is 0, Ed is 1, RD is 2. And so yeah, you can get any particular record you want to. Does that answer your question?
That was the range. So if I wanted
You want to?
to Stephen, all the ones including Stephen and RD.
Yeah. So you can use smelly people, and then you can use normal brackets, and then you could use naught dot dot. It might actually be square brackets. 1 or 2. Yeah, 1 say. It's, yeah. I think is it not round brackets? That's my Ruby syntax. It's smelly people that's the issue. My range syntax is failing me. Ed, you got Ruby API in front of you. What's range syntax for line 21?
So what do you want to do?
Just do a user range. I just can't remember what the syntax is. It's calling it as a function, which is not defined as. Yeah. Can you put that for loop back in? Have you got that on your clipboard or anything? So one of the things we can do, the reason I wanted to put age in there, and we were talking, the gentleman here suggested about if statements and things. So if we, in the for loop, use an if statement. So if we say where the puts x equals name at the moment is, if you change that to if x.age is greater than 25, then put the name. Yeah.
Why do you use the X when you
We don't need else.
use X?
You don't need an else. Just to distinguish the fact that doctor wasn't a special word. It could be absolutely anything. So that could be doc, for instance.
That's just a variable within the block. So it could be anything, and sometimes it's worth putting it something that you'll remember, something that means something. So if you have X, it doesn't really mean anything, and it's hard when you come back to the code later to understand what you meant.
Define that as variable up to that point.
So this is
It's a new variable.
within the block that we're defining now.
Yeah.
We could call it docs, perhaps.
So in Ruby, you don't have to define variables before you use them. In some languages, if you're going to use a variable, you have to, probably better to call it doc. In some languages, you have to define that variable before you use it, and you have to specify the type of the variable. So you have to say, this variable is going to be a doctor, this is going to be a string. In Ruby, you don't have to do that. In Ruby, a variable can hold many different things, and it can change throughout the life cycle of its thing. You've got put x dot's name rather than put doc. Yeah. 22, change x to doc.
So you're just literally giving a variable
A name. Yeah. So the key thing is the doctor at the top with the capital D. That's the thing that's fixed in stone. Every other variable you use, whenever you want to use it, you can give it whatever name you want to. And so what we've done at the bottom here now is we've just looped through and we've said, if the doctor is age older than 25, then put the doctor's name. So Stephen and Rob come up, but Ed doesn't. Does that make sense? So we can use if statements, so conditionals. And we could put a block on there as well, an else on there as well. So we could say else puts too young, for instance. And so this is going to print the doc's name for the first two, and then too young for the last one. Make sense? We can also do things like sorting. Do you have sorting on yours? So, very bottom line probably. It's gone, it's fine. So you can do, we can sort smelly people. So if you just get rid of the if and else again and just leave the loop in the middle, leave the loop, and just put the name out. So we can sort smelly people, and we can sort them by a whole range of things. So if you above that put smelly people, or in fact for doc in smelly people dot sort. So we're calling the sort method here on smelly people, and then we're going to specify what we want to sort on. So at the end of that, we're going to put curly brackets. Curly brackets. Do you want me to type it? It's probably easier. So we're going to sort. In fact, so let's say smelly people equals smelly people. Thanks. And dot sort. And we're going to use this syntax we saw before that was a bit confusing, so I'll try and explain it again. And we're going to say person.age, for instance. And what that's going to do is reassign smelly people. How do you run?
Commander.
Where do I have an error? So that's going to sort these people by age. So what's happening here is we're saying smelly people.sort, and then we're on this do person thing again. So this is exactly the same as what we had before. We're going through a for loop. We're just changing the syntax slightly. So we're saying smelly people, for each person in that, we're going to sort by the person's age. So line 18 says smelly people.sort, so pass the sort message to smelly people to this array, and then for each person, which is what the do person bit means, we loop through and we compare the person's age. And that's going to then, as you can see, order them at the bottom by Rob, Ed, Stephen. Although that's not actually ordered by age. It should be sort by, not sort. Yeah, so sort is a method that's on array. So that method is a method that's built into array. And then what we're saying in this block where we're saying, it should actually be sort by, I think. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, what we're saying, sort by, and then we're saying what do we want to sort by. So we're saying we want to sort by the age in effect. There's actually a slightly shorter syntax that you can use for that, which looks something like this, but is probably maybe slightly confusing, which does exactly the same thing. And so we're saying we want to sort by the age of a person here, basically. And you could sort it by name instead, for instance, and that will sort it alphabetically by the person's name. So I don't want people to get too hung up on all of these methods. Like, there are thousands and thousands of methods that are defining mood by default, and you can write as many as you want. The key thing is the idea that you have a class that you can have various objects of. So you make a doctor, you can have 10 doctors. You can define your own methods on those. You can put them in arrays, you can loop through arrays, sort through arrays. You can basically use this data however you like and model the data however you like. Are people vaguely with us? How are we doing for time? Do people want a break? I think we should take a break and then come back to websites in a little bit. There's a can you just put tryruby.org? There's a website called tryruby.org. If you've got a laptop or an iPad or something, if you go to tryruby.org, this website is totally free. It's a 15-minute tutorial that gives you basically instructions on how to start with Ruby. And it will tell you if you get stuff wrong, it will tell you where you go wrong. Yeah, you can type everything you've just seen us typing on this right-hand side. You don't need anything set up on your computer. If you just type next, you'll see on the left-hand side it gives you instructions. So it says something like type 2 + 6. It will then calculate to see if you've got it right. If you get it right, it then takes you on to the next lesson. If you've got it wrong, it takes you back to where you've got lost. It takes 15 minutes from start to finish, even if you're a total beginner. And then it recommends other resources to go from there. So if people want to, we're just going to take a half an hour break. If people want to play with that for half an hour, or any part of that, that might be really useful. Cheers.